Hello! Today I'm going to be showing you how to record a virtual lesson. We are going to go through the lesson that we actually created together in our previous video, and we're just going to talk about tips and tricks and what you need to remember while you are delivering a virtual lesson. All right. So we have some required components of a virtual or a recorded virtual lesson. All virtual lessons must be recorded with Screencast-O-Matic. That is what I am currently using to record this tutorial. If you would like to know how to access Screencast-O-Matic, start it up, tips on how to use it, if you have any questions whatsoever, I'm going to create a separate video to show you that. Also, you need to know that all lessons should be converted to Google Slides. Google Slides is what I'm using right now. Google Slides is what I showed you in the tutorial on how to create your virtual lesson. The instructor should be visible throughout the majority of the lesson. So that's just referring to the little square that you see with my face in it. For the majority of the lesson, you should be able to see the teacher. Here are some recommended components for the virtual lesson. Minimize distractions in the background, speak slowly and clearly, use TPR, total physical response, and gestural prompts, use supplementary tools, props, and manipulatives, keep communication generic so that it can apply to all of your viewers as much as possible, leave time for students to process questions and content. Prompt students for participation and communication throughout the lesson to promote student engagement. So first we are going to start with our title page. Every lesson should begin with a title page that kind of sums up what you're about to do. It gives a good visual. It's kind of striking. It's like the intro sentence to your lesson, right? So on this one, we see the title. The title of this example lesson is Health. We have an I can statement, so a student-friendly statement that tells what we're going to be talking about in the lesson. For this one, our I can statement is I can identify that what the human body needs. And the reason that's our I can statement is kind of because it encompasses the focus standard, but then the supplementary standards that we're using for this lesson. This is kind of where you're going to put all of this information. This is really helpful for any other teachers who are teaching your lessons as well. As far as the background goes, you'll see in the previous video, I was able to tell you, like, you can change this background up. It doesn't have to be busy. It can be really simple. It can be a solid color, or it can be, a big, bright, beautiful picture. It's really personal preference. Next, you are going to have something where this is something you'll see in an elementary science lesson because we have to review our steps to science safety rules. And this is just like a creative way to do it. You don't have to do it this way, but I like to pick something that is related to the lesson. For this one, I chose a background that has beautiful fruit and I picked some apples and I engage them with like an activity. This is like a great activity within a virtual lesson because we know we're limited by our circumstance. So for this one, I'll say bite the apples to see the science safety rules, and I'll try to get them to help me bite the apples. And then we're going to bite them together. We're going to make them disappear so we can see the different science safety rules. This seems silly, but honestly, if you can get one kid to bite an apple on your screen, it's fun, it's engaging, and like you got that kid, right? So it's worth it, even if it feels a little bit silly. So this is just one way to engage your students with the science safety rules. Obviously, this will look different depending on the subject that you're teaching and depending on your grade level, but it's just an idea. This is a slide that shows the science safety rules. This it's just a video, is support if you want to teach more about the science safety rules. You can do this if you have time, if you feel like you have like a longer than usual lesson, like maybe you don't include this video. Totally up to you. This is not a required component. These are just ideas to supplement your science. All right, so steps to critical thinking and problem solving. This is a slide that needs to be present in all of our lessons. We need to have this. This is one of the required components. So you'll make sure that you review these steps to critical thinking and problem solving. Let me give you an example. So I would say, all right, I'm going to ask you some questions, but first, I want us to review our steps to critical thinking and problem solving. Step 1, listen to the question. Step 2, listen to all of your answer choices. Step 3, think about your choices. Step 4, answer the question by choosing one of the answer choices. Okay, so while I was doing that, I was trying to use TPR, but I was also using sign language. Totally up to you, personal preference, what you feel comfortable using. The gestural prompts are more engaging. It makes them look at you. It has them experiencing language in a different way. It's called total communication. Like the idea is that you're communicating verbally, but for some students, maybe a visual communication is better. You're just trying to reach everyone where they're at. So that's just how I would deliver that. How you deliver that is up to personal preference, but this is required. So this has to be in the slides or in the presentation. Next, I introduce some questions to think about. This is required as well. So you want to have what would have been pre-test questions before. These are thinking questions. I do these before the anticipatory set, and they just get the kids thinking about what the lesson's going to be about. So I might say, I have some questions for you about our lesson. You might not know the answers yet, but that's okay. I just want you to be thinking about these questions while we're learning all of this new information. Here's our first question. Which food is nutritious? Is it candy, banana, or soda? Which one is nutritious? Okay, so I use a lot of TPR in that as well. When I'm asking for a response from a student, when I want an answer, I put my hand up to my ear to tell the students I want an answer, right? And I know not all of our students are giving verbal answers. That's not the point. It's like I create these visual things that I use consistently throughout my lessons so my students learn this means give me an answer. This means I'm giving you time for an answer. But when I do these thinking questions, I do this. Like, we're going to think about this together. There's not going to be an answer. This lets my students know that we're not answering this question right now together. We're just thinking about it. And we want to keep thinking about it for the rest of the lesson. So I'm not prompting for a response. I'm not asking them to answer it. I'm just asking them to think about it. And my total physical response, my gestural communication is explaining that to them. If you spoke a different language and I was saying these things but giving these responses, you would know I'm saying, we're thinking, we're not answering. But if I went like this, you'd be like, oh, she wants me to tell her something. Like, that's kind of the point of TPR. It's to bridge language and communication gaps. So anyway, so you're going to give these questions whatever way you see fit. That's personal preference. That's your style. And then I have 3 questions. I use my pre-post test questions, and then these are comprehension questions that I ask again to check for understanding throughout the lesson. Again, personal preference. They just need to be there. You have to have questions that promote thinking at the beginning of the lesson. You have to have questions to check for understanding or comprehension within the lesson, and then you need to have those questions at the end of your lesson that check for understanding your post-test, that type of thing. Next, we have our anticipatory set. This can be anything. For me, an anticipatory set is usually a video and then a conversation. So I'll show the video, and maybe during the video I'm talking, like I'm pointing things out, like, oh, did you see that? Is that something you think would be a healthy food? Like, we're talking about it. That's up to you. An anticipatory can be a picture that you talk about. An anticipatory can be a poem, or like, it can really be anything. It's something to just get them thinking. It's kind of like activating prior knowledge, which is something that you may do in your classroom. You may do APK instead of an anticipatory set. But you have to do one or the other. Those are a required component of the new lesson. So you want to make sure that you have either an anticipatory set or something to activate prior knowledge. And then you probably want a question to check understanding of the anticipatory set. So I just do a basic based on this anticipatory set. What do you think we're going to learn about today? And I give these options. Do you think we're going to learn about hats, food, or chips? Which one? So that's one of like my consistent visual responses. I try to keep my language the same, and I try to keep my TPR the same. When I ask the question I want to answer to, I ask the question, I give the possible answers, and then I say which one, and I put my hand up to my ear because I want an answer from you. And then you want to make sure you're giving like at least 5 seconds for them to process and answer either in their head or answer out loud. Like if they have a parent, they're going to pause the video, right? But if they don't have a parent there, you need to give them like 5 seconds to like consider it, right? Give it a shot. And this is really important. And this might just be a personal preference, but for me, I do not like to say that's right because you don't know what they answered. So it's really important for me to phrase it almost like in a rhetorical way. So I give the answers and I ask for a response. And then I say, did you say food? Food is what we're going to be talking about today. Today we are going to be talking about nutritious food that our bodies need to stay healthy. I don't ever say, that's right, or good job, or you got it, because I don't know that they did. And I don't want to give positive reinforcement. I don't want to reinforce an incorrect answer. That doesn't help anything. It's still just as positive for them to, in their head, say, oh, I said nutritious food. I was right. They can reward themselves with knowing that it's correct. You giving them the correct answer lets them know that they were correct, right? And as long as you stay positive, it's not a negative experience. It still can be a positive reinforcer for those who got it correct. And even that moment where you say, did you say food? That gives them a chance to answer it again, like, oh, that's right, I meant food. Food is what I meant. Like you're still giving them all these opportunities to make the correct choice. So that's why I think it's important not to say that someone got something correct when you don't know that they got it correct. Next, we have a reward system. Now, I would say introduce this reward system earlier. I don't typically do reward systems, but I think this is awesome, and this is something that I'm going to start doing. So if you see my videos before and you're like, I've never seen you do this, this is something I'm going to start doing. So this is like a reward system that shows a first then, and also, side note, this can be whatever you want. This can be a baby shark with teeth in his mouth. We're going to go through the lesson. And every time we finish a big section of the lesson, baby shark's going to get a tooth. You're going to get flour in your garden. You're going to get an apple in your basket. Totally up to you. This is your reward for your lesson. For me, I created this and I was like, this is very visual and I like it. So what I have is a first then board on the top. I have what we're doing. We're doing science. And then I have a generic award because I have to keep it generic. I don't have my individual kids in front of me. I don't have my kid that likes the jelly beans. I don't have my kid that likes to go outside. So like I can't give them their specific reward. Something that might be a reward to one friend is a punishment to another friend. So for me, I just kept it award. And then at the end of the presentation, I hope to have like maybe some fireworks or like something fun, just to say like you did it. And honestly, another great thing about this reward system, it's a sequential smiley face system. So you have the chance to earn 5 smiley faces. And that also shows you, okay, I'm 3 smiley faces in, I'm almost there. I'm 4 smiley faces I'm in, I'm almost there. It's a great scheduling tool for something that's not so easily scheduled, like a virtual lesson. All right, let's keep going. All right, on this slide, this is a required slide. You do need to have a repeated storyline and you need to have vocabulary in your lessons. So we have the repeated storyline here. I have just chosen, I need nutritious foods to survive, right? And then I have this vocabulary that I've taken straight from Attainment. You can take your vocabulary wherever you like. Just make sure that it's standards-based vocabulary, right? It needs to be relevant to the standard, but then it also needs to be relevant to the content. And it's a little different in science because our content is our standard, but this would be different in English. Like if you were talking about identifying main characters, you want main characters to be one of your vocabulary words, right? But then maybe you would also like the setting of the story, like Columbia. You'd want that to maybe be a vocabulary word too. So exposing them to new words, but also like content-based words. All right. So this is just an idea for an activity that you can integrate into your slides presentation. This is really interactive for me. KWO charts are always easy and a great way to interact, and they kind of apply to everything. They're an effective tool to use within a video lesson to aid the flow. They're also great to keep students engaged. So, this is just one way to do it. You might have your own way to do it. This is not required. This is just a suggestion. I'm going to go ahead and go past this. This is just a visual to show you. I would say, okay, so let's make a KWL chart together. What do you already know about needs? We're talking about healthy foods that people need. What do you know about needs? Well, last week we learned about plant needs. We know plants need water, sunlight, and nutrients to survive. That's something you already know about needs. What's something that you wonder about today's lesson? What's a question you might have? What healthy foods do people need to survive? That's a great question. And then you're going to lead into your content. Content is extremely personal. We just want to make sure that our content is research based, it's evidence based. We're providing good, rich content for our kids. We all have different styles. I'll explain to you mine briefly as we're going through, but I think it's important to start with like this thesis statement, right? It's a transition slide. It got your attention, right? We went from the KWL chart to this, and you're like, oh, something different's happening. They're thinking that too. They know that something just changed. So on this slide this week, we are talking about healthy foods that people need. That's what we're talking about, right? It's just going to summarize the lesson, and then we go right into it. I personally like to do. Here's how I think of it. It's like we understand our scope and sequence, right, for lessons, but they don't necessarily understand why we choose what we choose. We know that we have this blanket thing of like, we're teaching you what living things need. We taught you what plants need. Now we taught you what humans need. Now we're teaching you about one of the things that humans need, which is healthy foods. They don't get that scope and sequence always. Like it's such a broad idea. So I like to break down that scope and sequence into the lesson too. Like let's backtrack and let's figure out why we're here. This isn't random. We're here for a reason. Okay, so anyway, you proceed with your lesson. This is going to look however you like it. So I said, living things have needs, plants have needs, you know what they are. I do a review slide, make a connection slide, and then we go right into what we're learning. This pretty much sums up the whole lesson. This could be the whole lesson, right? And no, not quite. So just make sure that you're using cute speech. You're giving them time to engage in the lesson. You're just really taking your time with this. All right, and here's where I put a check for understanding, a comprehension question. I just did this slide. In here, I gave shelter. Shelter is one of the things that people need. I gave the answer, and then I'm coming in here and I'm like, were you paying attention? Let's check. A house is an example of a, is it an example of shelter, rest, or unhealthy food? Which one? I like to count to 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. Did you say shelter? A house is an example of a shelter. That's just the way I do it. You may have a different way of doing it. Obviously, you have a different way of doing it. We're all different, but I'm just showing you what I do and telling you why I do it. There's a method. There's a reason why I don't say that's right, good job. I think it's a good reason, but if you don't think it's a good reason, then say that's right, good job. If you think it's more important for your kids to hear something to keep them going, and even if the answer is wrong, you still want them to know that they're doing, oh, that's right, that good job, nice try, um, excellent effort. If you think that's more important than the negative impacts of inappropriately placed like positive reinforcement, that's totally your point of view and do it. Say great job. If you need to say great job to get you through it, do it. Um, that's just preference. So now I'm getting into like my research-based, evidence-based instructional materials, which I think is really important. We know that using this format of a story-based lesson is evidence-based in itself. So good job. You're using evidence-based practice. But we also know that we've picked core like instructional means to be able to give our students, research-based interventions and instructional resources like that kind of thing. So blah, 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 blah. Anyway, I'm using attainment for science. You might be using something different. So just know that as we go through this, you're going to be seeing attainment, which is accessible on the Google Drive now. Admin uploaded all of that. So like if you're not using attainment, maybe try it because it's actually very good. I think it's great. So anyway, you're going to see the beginning of the chapter here, and then you're going to see the repeated storyline. This is when I really get into the repeated storyline. And I'll say, whenever you guys see this yellow star, that means we're going to say our repeated storyline. Do you remember our repeated storyline? I need nutritious foods to survive. There you go. All right. And then I'll just come up here and I will read it. And I mean, I like to use as much TPR as possible while reading, but it is hard. And I'm fluent in sign language, and it is hard to sign while you're reading, and it is hard to use TPR when you're reading. So just like, don't be too hard on yourself and know that any gestures you use are great. And if you can't use any while you're reading, that's totally fine. That's not like a requirement. Just it's a suggestion. So I'm not going to read this to you, but I would read this and I would just make sure that I'm using the same modeling practices that I would when I'm reading. And this changes from grade level to grade level. So like this is really up to you. But if I read something like a question, a story, I always like to answer it. So in here it says, I want you to think about your favorite food. Is it pizza, ice cream, apples, hamburgers? I'd stop there and I'd say, what is my favorite food? Hmm. My favorite food are apples. I really like apples. What's your favorite food? And then give them a chance to answer it, give them a chance to feel it, whatever they need to do, and then move on. That's how I do it when I'm reading too, like, just in general, or read aloud. And then I say, oh, do you see the yellow star? Do you remember our repeated storyline? I need nutritious foods to survive. Also, I have a method to the way that I do the repeated storyline. The first couple of times they see it, I don't give them much of a pause. I say, do you see the yellow star? I need nutritious foods to survive. That's a repeated storyline. And then as we get further in, like 3 or 4 in, that's when I'll give them the pause. Like, do you remember our repeated storyline? Give them a chance to say it. I need nutritious foods to survive. Like, that's up to you. Total preference, just a style thing. All right, I'm going to do a check for understanding question. Do it the same way we showed it before. Make sure you give them time to respond, be engaging. Oh, and we've been working really hard. And you did a great job. You put a lot of effort into answering that question of understanding. So I think you've earned another smiley face. So you have 2 smiley faces. Remember, you need 5 smiley faces to get the reward. And you have 1, 2. How many more smiley faces do you need to get to your reward? 1, 2, 3. 3 smiley faces. You don't need to do that. You can do whatever you want. You might have kids who know, I need 3 more smiley faces. You're not going to go over that with them. Just depends on how old your kids are, who you're talking to. All right, so I would come in here. Um, this just kind of tells you over here in the bubble, it tells you how I feel about the repeated storyline, how I deliver it. Something else I would do is I would ask questions during the reading. So I would probably read this text, diet is what you normally eat, blah, 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 and then I'd say, I have a question for you. And then I would ask a question about it. So, this isn't a great chunk for the question. Let me go to the next one. Okay, we'll go over that in a second. I'll bring the questions back in a second. All right, so this is a making a prediction slide. This is not required, but this is one of my suggestions for keeping students engaged while you're reading a long text. I put up a slide with a big, beautiful picture, and I say, let's make a prediction. Use your eyes to look at this picture. Based on what you see, what are we going to read about next? That's all TPR. Use your eyes to look at this picture. Based on what you see, what are we going to learn about next? It's all TPR, just using your hands to talk, visuals. I'd let them think about it. Maybe I would talk to them about it a little bit if I have time. Ooh, there's some bread. I see some bread. And I see salad and fruit. Ooh, look at this little tiny sliver of candy. I wonder why that's so much smaller than the fruits and vegetables. I don't know. Let's make a prediction. What are we going to read about next? And then I would read what we read about next. That's an option. I think using slides to have them making inferences is so important. So if you can give them chances to make inferences like during the lesson, why not? It's a great way to engage them. If we're going to engage them, like why not do it in an effective way? So like I'd read this slide. I'll use this one for my question about examples. So some foods are not very good for us at all. These are unhealthy foods. Unhealthy foods are soda, candy, chocolate, or French fries. I have a question for you. What's an example of an unhealthy food? Did you say sodas, candy, chocolate, French fries? Those are all examples of unhealthy foods. I mean, isn't asking a question for understanding just a chance to reteach the thing that you just said? That's kind of what it is virtually, right? I mean, you're asking a question, no one's actually answering the question to you. If they are, awesome. Like they're on the other side of the world, right? So you don't hear the answer. You can't use it for formative data. You're just using it as a chance to say, that's let's reteach it, let's say it again, like, so that's what you can use it as. I still think these questions are important because they're checking for understanding, they're giving a chance to engage, and they're reinforcing pieces of information that you think are important. They like isolate those important pieces of information. Do you see the yellow star? That means we have a repeated storyline. Do you remember what's our repeated storyline? I need nutritious foods to survive. Mhm. Oh, oh, let's go back to that. Try not to block the content if you can. I know it was harder on some of the other slides I had, but that's just because they were too small if I shrunk them down too small. But these are great. If you can keep yourself like a little nook carved out for your face to go, that's awesome. That's a good practice. All right, here's another prediction slide. You know what to do here. All right, we have more content. Let's see if my Oh, this is when I talked about my catchphrase. So another catchphrase that I have is I have a question for you. I think it's important for kids who have maybe slower auditory response times to have a visual, right? So that's why we use TPR. And I feel like if I say, I have a question for you, that becomes a familiar phrase with a familiar visual. And I know that this is not the actual sign for question. This is like to quiz, to be inquisitive of. This is a question mark, right? Okay, but I do this because this is simple. It's a small little visual. And different signs take on whatever meaning you want them to. So when a kid sees me put up my finger and say, I have a question for you, they know that a question is coming. So they can reframe their mindset. They can say, I'm ready for a question, instead of me like finishing reading and saying, what are the two different types of carbohydrates? Like they weren't ready for the question. Maybe they weren't ready yet. Like, and they're using all their response time to try and figure out what you just said instead of realizing, like, instead of being able to get into that mind frame, like with a setup. So that's just my personal opinion. I think it helps to give them that setup question with the TPR. All right, here's another prediction slide. They're kind of just throughout their great chance to engage. Some more content, prediction, content. Another check for understanding. You're going to keep asking these questions. Oh, let me review this with you too. Okay, so one option that I think would be great for asking questions for our kids at home to get them engaged is using some kind of color-coded card response. So if you have students at home and they might not have access to all of these picture questions, like these pictures for the questions, right? But they can have access to a red, green, blue, yellow card. So the idea is that if I asked you this question, which is a nutritious food? Is it candy, banana, or soda? They can look and they can say, oh, the banana's green, the soda's blue, the candy's red. Okay, I think it's the banana. So maybe they pick green. Some of your higher level thinkers are going to be able to do that, but your thinkers who are not quite on this level aren't going to be distracted by these colors, hopefully. So you can take them out if you don't want to use them, but I'm going to use them to try and engage my learners who can use that color coded system to give responses. I hope you guessed banana. All right, more making predictions. So this is just what a core lesson could look like. And then you can wrap it up with your KWL chart. Answer that out. Oh, did you learn that today? Oh, look, we got another smiley face. We worked really hard and we finished reading our lesson, our big chapter in our book about healthy foods. Got another smiley face. Great job. Good for us. All right, so this is just an example of an activity. This is not required. I'm just trying to give you some different ideas for activities to do in your lesson. This is one that can be really engaging virtually. Like, it's just something that I came up with trial and error that we got here. We tried different things. We ended up here. Long story short, right? So this one, I feel like I really like to work with senses with my kids. So I introduced the senses. I want them to be really familiar with them. And then we talk about how we can use our senses to experience the lesson. So it's making connections between senses and things having to do with the lesson. That's all it is. So I say, oh, how can we use our smell to experience healthy foods? Let's move the plate to find out. Strawberries. We can smell strawberries. Strawberries smell so good. Do you like the smell of strawberries? Blah, 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 and go through, and you just go through and do them. You can change this for every lesson. You can change it to be not a plate. It could be, I don't know, a cloud if you're doing weather. It could be, I don't know. It could be whatever. Or it could just stay a plate. They don't care if it's a plate. Or it could be a square, a circle, whatever. If you want to be generic and not cutesy, that's fine too. Just that's an idea for an activity. Ooh, we did a great job. We finished that census activity together. That was hard work. I think we earned another smiley face, don't you? Next, we are going to do our steps to understanding connections. This component is a required component for the virtual lessons. You must have the steps for understanding connections in your virtual lesson. So we would review the steps, listen to the lesson. How does this apply to school? How does this apply to the community? How does this apply to the world? And then we would go to the next slide and we would see all the ways that it can apply to the community or community, school, and world. So the way this looks for them is you're going to click on school first, then community, then world. We know that it's just sequential slides, right? But you have to create that virtual magic. So I say first we're going to make a connection to our school. Here's how I like to choose my making connection videos. So I like to do one explanatory video or like a how-to video. Then I like to do maybe a song or a read aloud. I like to mix it up because there's three options to make connections and I want the media to be different. It doesn't have to be. You can do three songs, you can do three read alouds, you can do reading A to Z book that you read. I mean, however you make the connections is up to you. It could be just an image that you go to and you say, let's look at this picture of this beautiful, I don't know, lunch that you'd find at school. That's probably not a great example, but it's however you want them to make the connections, however you think you can facilitate that for them. So what I did was I embedded these videos, which you will need to do with any videos that you use. You want to embed the videos because you don't want any of that bopping in and out of the slides. Once you're in the slides, you want your slides to just be, right? You want everything you need to be in your slides presentation so that they're not seeing your web browser, they're not seeing you go to YouTube, they're not seeing you like type in URLs. That's all distracting. It doesn't need to be there. You can solve all that by just embedding this video into your slides presentation or any links that you need. You can embed them into the slides presentation. Even you're reading A to Z books, you can do snippets of the pages and embed them into the slides presentation. It's all doable. If you do have to get out of your slides presentation and make a transition, just press the pause button at the bottom where your Screencast-O-Matic video is, and then go where you need to go, like get it set up, get ready to go, and press the record button again, and it'll pick off right where you left off. But that way you don't have to show that transition. It's distracting. All right, so you'll make those connections. All right, we're gonna make a connection to the community. This one's a read aloud. It's about a community garden. We're going to make a connection to the world. This is a song about different types of food you'd find around the world. Let's talk about which ones are healthy and unhealthy. Whatever you want to do. We did a great job making those connections. You made connections to your school, your community, the world. I think that we earned another smiley face. And look, you have 5 smiley faces. That means we get our award. Great job. I know I don't say great job, but like clearly we just earned 5 smiley faces. So that's when you say great job. I mean, if you're not saying it to them, at least say it to you. You earned those smiley faces. So great job. And then this is where you gotta like decide what you're gonna do. You could put a trophy on the next slide. You could put fireworks. I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. I really don't. Um, it could be a Kids Bop music video if you think that that'd be something fun, something different, a little brain break, a cuckoo kangaroo. I really don't know what to tell you. just make it fun and make sure you're excited about it so they know that they worked hard and they got that reward. And that's the best that you can do. You might be able to talk to your parents about maybe getting a picture printout of like whatever you decide to use as the image for your award, and they can have it at home and like, oh, it's time for an award. And if so and so likes chocolate syrup, maybe they get a little chocolate syrup for their award. That can be an at-home thing too, a communication with your parents. So that's just going to be really individualized, and that's up to you and your parents and the kids and how you can reward them because really they deserve the rewards. They're working hard. So if we can figure out how to do that, it's really important. All right, and this is the completion slide. So this is how I like to end a video. This one looks a little bit different. I don't think I edited this one, but that's okay. So I like to end it with the exact same slide that I started with and say, oh, thank you so much for joining me for today's health lesson. I'll see you next time. Whatever you want to do. You could ask some questions like, did you like the lesson? Did you enjoy yourself? What was your favorite part? Like you might do that in class, do that at the end. Like they're familiar with that. They like that from you. So you do what you want to do. I just say goodbye and I finish the video out and upload it and it's good to go. All right, so that's how you would do that core lesson, right? Next, you need to know how to do some activities. And these are just some ideas. And there's some links here to support you in creating these activities. Here's a KWL chart. This can be printed, it can be filled out, it's blank. So like however you want to use it, use it. If you want your parents to use it at home, cool. Like if you want to use this, go for it. This is just an idea. I also have the census activity. I have it blank. It's on a docs or on a document so that you can change the pictures. You can do whatever you want. It can be activity where at home. Maybe it's like a homework. Their parents do it with them. They can print it out. They can cut it out together. They can paste it. They did it with you in the live lesson, maybe, if you decide to do it. Maybe they did it with you in a separate lesson because you decided to take it out of that core lesson and use it as one of your supplemental activities. I don't know. It's up to you. I don't have to tell you how to make activities. I'm just giving you some ideas. This is what I do. And then with science, I always like to do a lab. And there's a little link to show you what the lab looks like down there. I'm about to break my own rules and show you my web browser. But this is one of my generic, like just what a lab would look like. I pick an activity that does not have too many directions, right? I'm not going to say get a bag of Dorito chips and one paper towel, place 6 Dorito chips. Like I just want it to be the spirit of the activity. You can tell by looking at this picture, we're trying to figure out how greasy potato chips are compared to vegetables. We want to see grease on a paper towel. We want to see that these aren't greasy. You see that. It's self-explanatory. All my labs are very simple like that. They're like mini experiments. And then I like to do 2 questions that correspond with the lab, and I can ask those. So like what I would do if I recorded this as a separate activity, I would record me doing the lab. I would put it out, I would do everything. I would have my camera looking at it and I'd be talking to them, telling them what I'm doing as if they're there with me doing it. And then we would go over the questions together. I would ask them the questions, I'd ask myself the questions, we'd answer them together. It would be a lab that I actively engaged them in as an activity, and that would be one of my supplemental activities for this presentation. And then at the end here, I like to include my pre and post test. I don't know what we're going to do with this yet. I don't know what this is going to look like, but I have it here so that if we go back in a quarter, we have them in the lessons. They're important to be here because they still exist, even though we don't know how we're going to use them yet. Before I let you go, I just wanted to bring your attention to these other presentations that we've made for you. This is a virtual lesson template that you heard me reference before. I made a video to go along with this to show you step by step how to customize this template that we've created for you. So this is just a generic, basic, no bells and whistles, like how to create your lessons, like your questions and your making connections. Like this is just a basic like guide for you, some help if you're like, oh, I really like how she did making connections, but I don't want to make that from scratch. Where is that? It's here in that virtual lesson template. Also, I want to bring your attention to this presentation, the parts of the lesson that we created for you. This goes piece by piece and tells you all of the required components for your virtual lesson. as you're creating it, as you're presenting it, and it just explains what each of them are. Like maybe you don't totally understand what an essential question is. That's okay. It's here. Maybe you don't understand why we do the reinforcement system. That's okay. It's here and it explains it for you. So please use these resources to help you, answer any of those questions. And then, of course, we're always here to help you. So feel free to reach out to me if you need any help or anybody on the team. Thank you so much. Good luck.